Families Forum named them as Michael Nisambam, Hanan Yablublak, and Orion Hernandez Rudox, and said their bodies had been returned to Israel for burial. The bodies were identified by medical officials at the Israeli National Forensic Institute. Apologies for that. I'll take that again. The bodies were identified by medical officials at the Israeli National Forensic Institute and the Israeli police. The Israeli military's spokesman, Daniel Hagari, said they were found following a joint operation between the IDF and the Shin Bet, Israel's security service in the Jabalia neighborhood. Now, French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal paid tribute to the French-Mexican Hamas hostage Joran Hernandez Rudox on the sidelines of a visit to Valeix on southeast France, where he gave a progress report on juvenile delinquency.
Bouleversés par cette annonce et cette nouvelle du décès de notre compatriote Orion Hernandez Radou qui était retenu en otage par le Hamas à Gaza. Évidemment, je veux adresser mes pensées, ma solidarité à sa famille, à ses amis, à ses proches. C'est un drame qui nous rappelle que nous avons toujours 2 otages français qui sont retenus dans la bande de Gaza. Et je le redis ici aux Français, notre priorité absolue, c'est évidemment de parvenir à leur libération pour qu'ils puissent retrouver leurs proches en sécurité.
In the meantime, the International Court of Justice on Friday ordered Israel to halt military operations in Rafah. It also ordered Israel to keep open the Rafah crossing into Gaza for the unhindered provision of humanitarian aid. ICJ rulings are legally binding, but the court has no concrete means to enforce them. Israel had argued before the court that an order to stop military activity would give free rein to Hamas extremists and prevent its army from rescuing hostages taken in the group's brutal October 7 attack. Prosecutor Karim Khan alleged that senior Israeli leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, plus top Hamas officials, were guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity related to the war in Gaza and the October 7 attack.
The court considered that, in conformity with its obligations under the Genocide Convention, Israel must immediately halt its military offensive and any other action in the Rafah governorate which may inflict on the Palestinian group in Gaza conditions of life that could bring about its physical destruction in whole or in.
Let's also tell you that the Palestinian ambassador to the UN hailed the International Court of Justice's order for Israel to halt military operations in Rafah and called for Israel to abide by the ruling immediately. He said it is expected that resolutions of the ICJ be implemented without hesitation.
The provisional measures adopted by the ICJ, we are grateful for South Africa and those who supported them for going back to the ICJ, asking them for additional provisional measures. And we welcome these provisional measures, including stopping, the military operation in Rafah. We believe that the provisional measures of the ICJ also previously asked for stopping all military operations in the Gaza Strip and stopping these crimes and potential crimes of genocide against our people in the Gaza Strip.
Now to discuss this further, I'm joined by Bolu Michael-Biyi, a foreign policy analyst. Michael, many thanks for coming on. Bolu, many thanks. What is your assessment of the ICJ's ruling, and do you believe it adequately addresses the severity of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
It's a welcome development, that we're seeing this happening now. And the same ICJ mentioned a couple of months ago that if nothing is done in terms of humanitarian action in that region, there's going to be gross loss of lives. So it's not a surprise that this is happening right now. However, if it adequately solves what's on ground, now that depends on the humanitarian aid agencies and those on ground, because the ICJ can say, can set the foundation legally for humanitarian aid organizations to carry out their role. However, if they refuse to do so, or there's no adequate resources, then the people will continue to starve and the humanitarian crisis will continue. So it sets the foundation. However, the bulk of the work is on the humanitarian aid organizations.
So the ICJ's ruling has been hailed as a major victory for Palestinian rights, but some argue it could embolden extremist elements and undermine regional stability. How do you balance, competing interests and priorities in this very complex geopolitical landscape?
Well, I'll be of a different opinion in the sense that on two fronts. First, the majority of the countries surrounding the region kind of, in principle, impliedly or expressly, pledge allegiance aligned with Palestine. So the mere order for humanitarian aid to pass through, I don't think would cause regional instability in any way. And I won't really call it a victory, because we need to understand, people need to understand the purpose of the ceasefire. The basic principle behind that order is to allow humanitarian aid to pass through. If it was a ceasefire for negotiation, then I would say, okay, maybe it's advancing the cause of the Palestinian state to be independent. But if it's just for humanitarian action, I don't think it has any major substance as to the advantages of the Palestinian people.
So what are the implications of the ICJ's ruling for the United States' relationship with Israel, particularly given the Biden administration's commitment to human rights and international law? How might this impact U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East?
I won't say that it would impact it greatly. However, one thing is clear. It's a test of U.S.'s commitment, because I've said earlier, said that some time on the show that Israel had the air of USA, and USA has the air of Israel as well. So even if Israel wants it to pass through and USA says otherwise, they will actually give it a thought. So this is a test of US's commitment to international law or humanitarian action, as they claim. So let's see what happens and what unfolds in the coming days.
Right. So considering the ICJ's ruling and the ongoing conflict in Gaza, what is the most critical step that the international community can take to prevent, further escalation and promote a lasting, resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? What role should foreign policy analysts like yourself play in shaping this type of response?
Okay, well, the international community can actually do a lot, and I think it's important for international, for countries all over the world to, put pressure on both parties to actually sit at the table and negotiate. A lot of people just, kind of talk about Israel, but there are two sides to this story. There are two parties involved. So it's not just about if Israel says today that they actually want to sit on the table, and the Palestinians say they are not coming. That does not advance any cause. So it's the responsibility of the international community to ask both sides to sit at the table and negotiate and ensure that whatever the negotiation addresses the root cause. Another thing is for the world to pledge that humanitarian action. I know Rwanda at some time they send aid to Palestine. We want to see more of that from the international community, and also pledge resources for the rebuilding of the infrastructure of Palestine. Most importantly, as the USA did and put together the Marshall Plan for the reconstruction of Europe, the world must come together for the rebuilding of the infrastructure of this broken country. And lastly, for foreign policy analysts like myself, well, it's our core responsibility to ensure that we give unbiased opinion and analysis to policymakers and the decision makers on offer. I think that's the basis or the core responsibility of a person like myself.
Bolu, many thanks for coming on. We appreciate you for doing this with us. Bolu Michael-Biyi, their foreign policy analyst, and he joins us live today just to give us more insight on the Palestinian and Israeli ICJ rulings. Move away from that now. The leaders of Germany and Portugal on Friday said the time was not ripe to recognize a Palestinian state after 3 other European nations announced plans to do so. Chancellor Olaf Scholz told a press conference after talks with Portuguese Prime Minister Luis Montenegro. Speaking at the same press conference, Montenegro said Portugal was also not in the position to recognize a Palestinian state. Ireland, Norway and Spain on Wednesday announced that they intended to recognize the state of Palestinian next week. The announcement drew fury from Israel, which warned of serious consequences for ties with the European nations.
Beginn aus meiner Sicht ist es so, dass wir keinen Anlass haben, jetzt eine Anerkennung der PA als eigenen Staat zu vollziehen. Es ist auch nicht so weit, sondern was wir brauchen, ist eine verhandelte Lösung zwischen Israel und den Palästinensern, die auf eine Zwei-Staaten-Lösung hinausläuft. Und dazu gehört dann auch eine palästinensische Autonomiebehörde, die für Westbank und Gaza zuständig ist. Aber da sind wir noch lange nicht. Jetzt geht es erstmal darum, einen längerfristigen Waffenstillstand zu erreichen. Und es geht auch darum, dass alle Beteiligten sich zur Zwei-Staaten-Lösung bekennen.
Estados. Relativamente a reconhecimentos unilaterais, nós não estamos em condições de o fazer, não o vamos fazer nesta oportunidade e aguardaremos também uma discussão e aprofundamento deste assunto no âmbito da União Europeia.
In Asia, President of the UN General Assembly, Dennis Francis, has announced that the memorial service for late President Ibrahim Raisi is slated for Thursday, May 30th. Francis paid tribute to the late Iranian president and foreign minister by signing a memorial book at the Islamic Republic's mission in New York. Recall that late President Raisi was returning from a ceremony to inaugurate a dam on Iran's border with Azerbaijan on Sunday when his helicopter crashed in Vazak, northwestern Iran. Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian and a number of senior provincial officials were also on board the helicopter that crashed, killing all on board. At least 14 people have been killed and 3 others injured after a fire ripped through an apartment complex in central Haino on Friday. When the fire started at 12:30 a.m., smoke and poisonous fumes shot out of the building in Kaige district, one of the busiest and most university-populated areas of the capital of Vietnam. Rescuers forced their way inside, breaking the lock of an external gate and smashing a window to rescue 7 people trapped inside. In a statement by the police, the fire grew strongly, destroying many motorbikes, electric bicycles and bicycles in the yard area, and adds that at about 1:26 a.m. the fire was completely extinguished. 3 survivors were currently receiving emergency treatment in the hospital. And now we head to South America, where hundreds of teachers across Peruvian capital city of Lima left their classrooms and took to the streets on Friday to demand higher salaries and labor. Unionized education workers affiliated with the Peru Education Workers Union have launched a 24-hour nationwide strike on May 23rd over a series of demands, including better salaries for teachers and larger investments in public education. Demonstrators plan to hold a march in Lima. They intend to gather along Avenida Arequida near Baca de la Reserva, and from there march to the Education Ministry located along Calle da Comercio.
Entre el Ministerio de Educación y el SUTEP ha habido 44 acuerdos, muchos de ellos no se implementaron porque no se han contemplado en la ley de presupuesto de este año, como es el aumento de remuneraciones para docentes y auxiliares de educación.
Por otro lado, estamos pidiendo que el piso salarial también se aumente 500 soles. Creemos de que eso es importante porque ahorita por el alza de costo de vida, pues ya nuestros sueldos han sido totalmente rebajados y hay muchas necesidades que los maestros tenemos para con nuestra familia.
Nosotros no queremos perder clases, porque el día de mañana va a ser una tarea que se va a juntar a la que ya tenemos, pero debido a la desatención del gobierno nos lleva justamente a tomar esta medida de lucha.
And in Europe, President Emmanuel Macron has warned against the French Pacific territory turning into a new Wild West. This is as a policeman killed a man on Friday after being attacked by protesters. The killing of a 48-year-old man by police on Friday took the death toll from the unrest to 7, including 2 gendarmes. This was the first time that a civilian had been killed by a member of law enforcement since riots broke out on May 13th. The prosecutors said the officer who fired the shots was taken into custody, adding that a probe into voluntary manslaughter by a person in authority was launched.
Illégitime, c'est pas ce que veulent nos compatriotes. Mais il ne faut pas non plus dire ça n'est rien. Mais ce que je demande de manière immédiate, c'est la levée de tous les blocages, la levée des points de violence, et qu'il y ait un appel clair à ces levées par le FLNKS, CCAT et tout responsable impliqué. Sur cette base-là, quand on le constatera, la deuxième étape, c'est qu'on mettra fin à l'état d'urgence. Troisième élément, c'est qu'on reprenne justement les négociations pour un accord global. Et c'est pour ça que, comme cela m'a été demandé, en particulier par les indépendantistes, j'ai une mission de médiation et de travail avec 3 missionnaires qui m'ont accompagné, vont rester et commencer ce travail. Et j'ai dit, dans un mois, je constaterai les choses. Et je vais regarder si le calme est revenu et que tout le monde s'est réengagé sincèrement. À ce moment-là, on se donnera le temps de finaliser cet accord global pour que ce soit lui qui rentre dans la Constitution.
In the meantime, Prime Minister Gabriel Attal on Friday paid tribute to the 2 Germans killed during the violence in New Caledonia, who failed to restore order, protect our fellow citizens during a ceremony in Mason Alvont, that's Val de Marne. Chief Quartermaster Nicolas Molinari, 22 years old, and Major Xavier Salo, 46 years old, were killed respectively on May 15th and 16th in Archipelago. The first by a shot in the head in intervention, the second by an accidental shooting of one of his colleagues while handling a weapon.
Continue, parce qu'il reste des femmes et des hommes à protéger, parce qu'il reste l'ordre à rétablir. La situation aujourd'hui reste extrêmement fragile en Nouvelle-Calédonie. Un rien peut la faire vaciller. Mais si nous savons une chose avec certitude, c'est que ce déchaînement de violence détruit et déchire, que ce déchaînement de violence ne résoudra jamais rien. C'est que les voies du dialogue seront toujours couvertes par le bruit des émeutes et que le consensus ne peut se trouver quand le désordre.
In a bit of sports to wrap it up, Stefano Pioli has left his role as AC Milan manager, the Serie A club announced on Friday after a season of disappointing results. The 19-time Italian champions will finish in second place this season, a significant way behind champions Inter Milan, and had a lackluster run in the Champions League and the domestic cups. Pioli, who led the Rossoneri to their first Serie A title in over a decade in 2022, was brought on board in 2019. Milan, the 7 times European champions, bowed out of the Champions League in the group stage, as well as the Coppa Italia after reaching the quarterfinals. Milan hosts Salernitana in their final league game of the season on Saturday. AC Milan extended their heartfelt thanks to the 58-year-old and said he helped re-establish the club as a European power. And that's all on Beyond the Continent. Remember that you can send us your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen. And do follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. You can also watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Judith at TV.